I fell in love with my therapist, and instead of leaving like I probably should have, I lied. I lied to keep seeing him, week after week, even though every part of me knew I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. That's my confession. It's been 3 years, and I still don't know if what I felt was love, obsession, or just me clinging to the first person who ever really listened. I'm 30 now, but this all started when I was 27. I was in one of the worst places in my life. My long-term boyfriend had just left me. I hated my job, and I was drinking too much just to feel numb. My mom suggested therapy, and I rolled my eyes at first, because in my family, therapy was something other people did. Weak people, broken people. But eventually, I caved. I Googled a list of therapists near me and picked one almost at random. His name was David, the first session. I remember walking in, arms crossed, ready to be unimpressed. And then I saw him. Early 40s, dark hair with a little gray, kind eyes behind glasses. Not movie star handsome, but the kind of face that instantly felt safe. And he looked at me like I mattered, like every word I said was important. Do you know how rare that is? At first, it was normal. He asked questions. I answered, slowly, carefully. But then something started happening. Every time I left, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying around bricks I didn't even know I was holding, and suddenly my arms were free. I'd replay his words in my head. You're allowed to take up space. You don't need to earn love. You survived things that would have broken other people. It didn't feel like therapy anymore. It felt like oxygen, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I started to fall for him. Not in a crush way, not like doodling his name in a notebook. No, this was deeper. I'd think about him when I woke up, wonder what he was doing on weekends. Imagine what it would feel like to have him look at me the way he did in sessions. But outside that office, I knew it was wrong. He was my therapist. There were rules, boundaries. But try telling that to my heart. I remember the moment I knew I was in trouble. It was maybe my 10th session. I was crying about my breakup, about how worthless I felt. And he handed me a tissue. Just a simple human thing. But when his hand brushed mine, just for a second, my whole body lit up. I looked up at him, and he was looking at me with so much care. Not lust, not pity, just care. And I thought, God, I could love this man. Here's where the confession part comes in. After 6 months, he suggested we might be ready to taper off, that I was making progress, that I could try bi-weekly sessions instead of weekly. And I panicked, because I didn't want less of him. I wanted more. So I lied. I told him I was drinking again, that I'd had panic attacks, that I was slipping back into depression. None of it was true. I just wanted to keep that chair across from him, to keep his eyes on me for an hour every week. And it worked. He kept me on, kept seeing me, kept listening. Every week I was both relieved and ashamed. I'd walk out of sessions and feel this rush of happiness, and then immediately hate myself. You're manipulating him, I'd think. You're wasting his time. You're selfish. But then the next week, I'd sit down, he'd smile, and all that guilt would melt away. It was like being addicted. He was my drug, and lying was the price of admission. Can I ask you something? If you were in therapy and you started falling for your therapist, would you quit? Or would you cling to it, even if it meant lying? Be honest, because I've never been able to figure out if I was weak or just human. It all came crashing down one afternoon. I'd had a rough week at work, nothing major, but I was emotional. And instead of talking about the issue, I blurted out, "I think about you. Outside of here. More than I should." The second the words left my mouth, I wanted to die. He paused, adjusted his glasses, and very gently said, "That happens sometimes. It's called transference. It's normal. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong." But then he added, "It does mean we need to be careful. Therapy is about you, not me." I nodded, but inside my heart was breaking, because in that moment I realized what felt like love to me was just a textbook term to him. After that, things changed. He stayed professional, but the air felt heavier. He avoided eye contact more. He steered conversations away from anything personal. And me? I doubled down on the lie. I told him I was spiraling. I exaggerated symptoms. Because I was terrified he'd say, "This isn't healthy. We need to stop." I couldn't lose him. Not yet. But the harder I clung, the emptier I felt. Sometimes, late at night, I'd picture a different version of us. Me running into him at a bookstore. Him asking me out for coffee. Both of us laughing, free from all the rules. In that fantasy, he looked at me not like a patient, but like a woman. And then I'd snap back to reality. Sitting alone in my apartment, knowing it was never going to happen. I stopped seeing him a year later. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the shame, the constant ache of wanting something I couldn't have. When I told him I thought I was ready to end treatment, he smiled and said he was proud of me, that I'd made real progress. I wanted to scream, "No, I didn't. I've been lying this whole time." But I didn't. I just nodded, shook his hand, and walked out. And then I cried in my car for an hour. If you've made it this far, I need to know. Do you think what I felt was real? Or was it just desperation disguised as love? Seriously, leave it in the comments. Because even now, 3 years later, I still can't tell the difference. Sometimes I wonder if he ever suspected the truth. If he knew I was lying just to stay. Sometimes I wonder if he remembers me at all. Because me? I still remember every detail. The sound of his voice. The way he leaned back in his chair. The way he made me feel seen. And that's the part I can't forgive myself for. Not that I lied. Not that I fell in love. But that 3 years later, a part of me still wishes it had been real.